This video is sponsored by my OnlyFans, where I do my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, relationship advice, and more. Hi guys, and welcome to Gadget Reviews and to this video discussion, live video discussion about, well, the Emperor. Are we wrong about him? Is he really a god? So this was basically spawned. Yes, I will use this word. Because firstly of mine and Logan's combined powers to make the stream about Doctor Doom God. I mean, Doctor Doom and his godly form, versus the Emperor. And of course, after this, I started researching because something occurred to me during that stream. And that thing was basically that the Emperor actually never created anything as a god, because when you are a god, you actually create stuff. That's like one of, if not the most important trait, ability, or whatever you can call it, that is absolutely mandatory for a being that should be called a god in general. I mean, can the god emperor of mankind create stuff like a god will do? Well, no. I mean, first I did my research, then I asked my primarch, my primarch the Eclyton, also to research that himself, and we did find, a lot of feats that the god emperor of mankind performed, but none of them was out of nowhere spontaneous creation of a world, people, whatever it is. He can create stuff, because he is a scientist and he can work with technology, and he can figure out a lot of stuff that are connected to technology, but he cannot make things out of thin air, Whereas the god Emperor Doom actually can. He is literally a god in every sense of the word. He can do a lot of stuff. He is out space and time. He can exist in both space and time and out of it. He is literally omnipotent, and everything that you can possibly call him, he is that. He is really a god. Doom, that is, when he became a god. And so, in that kind of a way, and after all the research and all of that, it really turned out, guys, that the Emperor, as far as he is, so powerful in the universe of 40k, he is not actual god. He has some powers that are, that could be, well, could be called godly. He does, really, especially what he did in the last book, Godblight, where he basically resurrected Gilliman and totally restored his body, filled it with power, all those things. He was able to communicate on a very strong psychic level with images and a lot of, I mean, that was amazing, just amazing scene. But beyond this display of power, he doesn't really do a lot of things that could be considered not destructive. So anything that is about creation, he can't do. He really can't. And we are going to take a look at this video that I linked down below, the first thing that you're going to see in the description. And the video is by Gamza, one of the channels that I'm also watching, one of the Warhammer channels. And Gamza has a very good point about why we are wrong about the Emperor of Man. And really, guys, when in general, in any fandom and, well, lore, whenever there's discussions between fans about different things, universes, there's always some misconceptions about certain things or characters. And in the case of the god emperor of mankind, we can totally say what he did and measure by this, but one can be easily confused by the crowds of fans that are telling you how they understand things, and maybe they heard something and they just go with that and run with this like it's a fact, but it's not. So we are all basically, to a different extent, well, casualties of this. So we do have to check, measure, and, well, come with some kind of a conclusion. So we have to get to this now and see what he says, because I was just surprised actually to find this video. I have not seen it before today at all, and that someone actually reached similar conclusions as I did. But the thing, and you can watch this happening live in the previous stream with Dr. Doom, when I literally realized when we were comparing powers, between Doom and the Emperor, that they're not that close as I thought. Like, first I was like, Doom, like what he's going to do. Well, not that I was literally like this, because I'm also a comic book fan, and I'm well enough informed that there's very, very powerful beings there, as well. But I didn't really get much into Doctor Doom in general, especially not past his interactions with the Fantastic Four. So I didn't know that there was this storyline that we were probably going to see on the big screen, at least some of it. But when we were comparing, it was ridiculous how he's actually stronger than the Emperor. And although we did reach a conclusion that the Emperor also can destroy him if he gets, if he just uses his powers right in the right time, it can go either way. For the most part, Doom can do a lot more than the Emperor. He can create, he can be out of space and time. He is not bound by anything, really. It's just like it started like, oh, who is going to be more powerful than the Emperor, and then it became like, oh damn, the Emperor is not even going to be able to hang with Doom for a long time. That is how it looks like. So let us hear the video though, because there's some other arguments here that are very, very interesting, and we just cannot just like ignore them. So we are going to see this, but as always, go and watch it to the fullest extent, the way that it was meant to be seen, and give Gamza a like, because not everyone would even dare to talk about this in general, or even care to think that far. So kudos for that, Gamza. Okay, let's see it.
Hello there everybody, welcome to this video. So I've got one to ruffle your feathers, and that is, how powerful is the Emperor of Mankind? You see, because there's a lot of misinformation out there about Warhammer 40k, where people like to read random psychic powers from a codex and just randomly apply it to the Emperor, and somehow this is supposed to mean that he's outer-versal, which they don't even know what these abilities mean to begin with, because it's a list of non sequiturs. What is a non sequitur? It's something that does not logically follow. So first and foremost, let's not talk out of our ass, let's actually take a look at what outer-versal actually means. Outerverse is a term used to describe a location or structure that is unbound by the idea of dimensions and space-time, originally coined by the Versus Battle Wiki. Such term is used in place to describe locations or beings that are conceptually different from the idea of dimensions, space and time. Entities who exist in an outerverse are usually metaphysical and utterly formless in relation to any number of higher dimensions. Alright, now let us scroll down just a little bit more, and it says a scale to outerversal existence. Baseline, characters who are simply beyond the concept of space and time, along with dimensions. These characters do meet the requirements of outerversal status. However, within their own tier, they are considered weaker due to having simplistic superiority to dimensions. baseline outerversal entities would be considered 1 if outerversal were to have a definitive number scale. Now this is super basic. All it is telling you is that if there is a scale to say what is an outerversal existence, the very baseline is being beyond space, time, and dimensions. We don't even have to go any further than this. This right here already supersedes what the Emperor of Mankind is. He operates within time. He is not beyond it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be crippled in a chair because he could operate outside the timeline to which he was crippled.
And yes, okay, that's the first thing that I want to discuss here. Everything is super important in this video, so we're going to go the whole thing. But I'm really surprised that nobody is talking about the fact that the Emperor is, in fact, tied to that freaking chair, and he cannot just walk out of there. He's there. He's just there. He cannot do anything. I mean, he cannot restore his own body for some reason. He can, restore Gilman's, but he cannot restore himself. Why is that? Because, Gilman's body was already decaying, and, his armor was decaying. Everything was decaying when the god blight actually took over, and he was dead. He was dead, but the Emperor is able to bring his soul back and totally restore his body, making him even more powerful, good as new as before. So if he can do that, why can't he just do that to himself? So he is bound by the throne. He cannot just restore himself. He should be perpetual, but he cannot go back from the dead. He can't. Although, as far as I understand, if you are perpetual, you can be restored no matter what happens to you. But I guess not. So there's so many things that are either inconsistent or not really that well explained, to the point where it's just like a plot hole or character hole, if you will, in the plot. Yeah, continue.
It gets even worse than this because he has to be outside of space, which essentially means he would be beyond the physical, beyond matter, because if you are beyond space, then you are beyond matter, because matter requires space. And guess what? Last time I checked, once again, the Emperor is in a chair, crippled, because his body is susceptible to the space that it occupies. So from the very get-go, this means that the Emperor doesn't even meet the baseline of what an outerversal existence would be. He is not beyond space, and he's not beyond time. Now, there is no reason to go any further than this because the Emperor doesn't even meet the baseline. However, I will scroll down a little bit further and we will look into the powers and abilities just to throw more dirt into the face of the people who actually think that the Emperor is somehow outerversal. Alright, powers and ability, irrelevant strength. Due to the concepts of space and volume not applying to these beings whatsoever, their strength is irrelevant. Even an infinite dimensional hyperverse has extremely little influence on a non-dimensional being and is practically non-existent to a meta-abstract. Alright, so this is again super basic. All it's saying is this person is operating outside space and time. He is beyond these things. Therefore, he's essentially beyond the physical. So his strength is irrelevant because he is already beyond the physical. He's not operating within the physical. So, let's say within the physical, that's where we operate. And so if I can lift 300 pounds, oh, that's great. But this person doesn't operate within the physical. So he's simply, by definition, beyond the physical. So his strength is irrelevant. It already supersedes what is physically possible, which already at the baseline completely supersedes everything that the Emperor has ever demonstrated. The very fact that the Emperor himself is a physical being shows that he is not outerversal. The very fact that the Emperor can be injured physically shows that he is not beyond the physical, that he quite very well operates within the physical, meaning that at the very baseline, he is absolutely, positively, objectively not outerversal. outerversal. Now, the reason why you see this being pushed so much is because of the warp and the Emperor drawing his powers from the warp itself. Now, the warp is something that people get very, very hung up on and very, very confused about. The warp is actually not beyond space and time. And in fact, it requires space and time to even operate because it is a mirror of the physical universe itself. Now, it is described as being immaterial, yet you have a timeline within the warp to which the Chaos Gods constantly fight. If they were not bound by time whatsoever, then there would be no timeline to which when Khorne was awoken, or when Slaanesh was awoken, or any of these things would even be happening to begin with, because they would be operating outside of time to begin with, which goes to show that even the warp and the entities that are in there are not beyond space and time, that they actually operate still within it. They do possess the ability to manipulate it, but the best way to describe this is think of like water. Humans are comprised of water, or at least a lot of it, and we can manipulate the water that is around us. How? Let's say a river. We can stop the flow of a river by damming it up. So we can manipulate the water that is around us. However, does that mean that we are now beyond water because we can manipulate it? The answer is no. Just because you can create a dam, just because you can freeze water, just because you can reroute a river to go somewhere else and manipulate it and boil it, etc., does not mean that you are now beyond water itself and you've transcended it. Quite the contrary, without it, you're still dead. Just like the warp energies that are bound by time, without those warp energies, you do not have a Chaos God. And if you do not have a timeline, you still do not have a Chaos God, because that means he never had a beginning, which means he never existed to begin with. And I'm pretty sure you are aware that there's a big part of the story to which the Eldar brought Slaanesh into being, which means Slaanesh had a beginning and therefore is not beyond time, and thus even debunking the fact that the Chaos Gods themselves are outerversal. This is a big no-go. Nothing in the Warhammer 40k universe is outerversal because it all operates within space and time. And if you want to know, does the warp have space inside of it? Of course it does. How do you think anybody even goes into the Eye of Terror to begin with?
Okay, that is very important too about the about the warp. So yeah. Does that not blow your mind? When I listened to this, I was like, then what is Luton then explaining about? You know, then one of his many videos, then the gods existed, we created them with our thoughts, but then they existed this whole time in the warp, but then there was no warp before people existed, but then the gods existed, but then we created them. So it's like this whole conundrum, or well, a huge logical mess. And then you can always say, well, the warp is the warp, so anything goes there. It just doesn't matter. Well, there has to be some kind of a has to be some kind of a logic how it's even functioning. No matter if it's equivalent to anything that we know on Earth or not, there still has to be something, you know. But yeah, it's a big mess, I guess.
With lands on a demon planet and fights with people. If there's no space, then no physical object. The fact that the Chaos Gods themselves are outerversal.
Oh yes, and this brings my point that I talked about this before, but basically the gods of chaos are written as demons, as high-level demons. They are not written, means that they may be called gods in the lore, from the writers, from us, whatever, but the way that they are written is just like they're basically higher-level demons. The way that they act, the way that they influence people in general, everything that they're doing is literally how a higher demon would act or do. It's, I don't know why is that. I mean, they're called gods, but in a lot of fantasy and all kinds of different fantasy lore franchises, the gods are very, very weak. If you haven't noticed, very weak. They're not even fitting in the frame of what God is supposed to be in general, they're all so limited by their powers. They're so easily hurt, and they just have physical bodies, which is ridiculous. Not even something that you can attribute to a god only in particular circumstances. And a god will not be able to use a physical body for a long periods of time, because that physical body will not be able to hold their essence, not even a little bit, just gonna burn out immediately. Yeah, there's a lot to this, but the point is that in general in Warhammer, the gods are written even less to an extent. They just basically want to destroy. They never created any planets or races, or well, maybe the gods of the orcs did. I'm not sure about that, but in general, the four gods, main gods, let's say just the main gods, are just written as high-level demons. That is it. If this was any other thing and they were just called demons, you know, they corrupt, they brainwash, they create different types of chaos. You know, Kron creates his types of war, blood and bone chaos. Slanesh creates his, her on, Nurgle his, and so on. And Zinch, his intrigues and stuff. That's exactly a demon work. It's not what a high level god will do. It's just something that he will appoint, you know, others that are a lot more lower level than the god itself to do those things. But yeah, so to begin with, I do not doubt that the gods of chaos are not beyond space and time, because once again, they are written like they should be in space and time in order to even exist. So if they were real gods, they will be beyond, well, everything that we can imagine or put a word on or for. Yes.
This is a big no-go. Nothing in the Warhammer 40k universe is outerversal, because it all operates within space and time. And if you want to know, does the warp have space inside of it? Of course it does. How do you think anybody even goes into the Eye of Terror to begin with, lands on a demon planet, and fights with people? If there's no space, then no physical object could ever go into the warp at all. How does Kaldor Drago go into the warp at all if there's no space? He couldn't enter it at all, or fight or destroy gardens, or, you know, kill Nurgle demons, or do any of this. He could have no armor, no equipment, and no body in the warp if there was no space for it to be there to begin with. So
yes, and also when he has a physical body and he enters something that's metaphysical, and he still is able to interact with it, even kill demons and be present there and not immediately vaporize or die and just turn into something else, then what is that immaterium even? This doesn't make much sense. I mean, the way that it is described to function, along with the fact that it's basically like a contradiction that he's able to go there with his physical body to begin with. So to begin with, yeah, if he's dead, sure, but with his physical body. So there's a lot of things that either are conscious decisions in general on the writers or whoever thought about the concept of the warp and the world of Warhammer in general. They made up their own rules or something like that, or it's just that the people that initially thought about those things and made them up, they don't even understand how these things are supposed to work in general. Yeah.
So the warp does have space and time within it, which once again means that the warp energies and the powers that psykers draw from them, while they can manipulate and be at least a little bit higher than the plain physical dimension, they are not outerversal. They are not beyond space, time, and matter. However, they can manipulate it to a degree, as I explained before, when it comes to water. However, they do not transcend it. They are not beyond it. Alright, so that should clarify if the Emperor of Mankind mankind is outerversal. Not even close, not even remotely close to being outerversal. If I was to power scale the Emperor, I would say at best he's probably planetary level, and if I wanted to be ultra, like super ridiculously generous, it would be solar system level, and even then I think that's pushing it. Some people may try to bring up stuff like warp storms and all this other stuff. Again, these are non sequiturs. These are things that people, it's just bad reasoning and critical thinking skills. I'm not trying to be insulting here, but you gotta call it for what it is. This would be like me saying, if I go and remove a couple of bricks in the middle of a dam and the water begins to leak through it and the dam gets destroyed and all the water comes rushing down and it destroys a city at the bottom of the hill, does this mean that me, Gamza, solo, as an individual, I am now a city destroyer level tier? The answer is no, because all I did was unleash the forces of nature to do the work for me. That power didn't come from my own. It's the same thing with the Emperor opening up a portal and warp energies begin to pour through. It's not energies that are coming from the Emperor himself. It's simply him removing a brick from the dam and letting the warp energies do the rest of the work for him. So I do not think that the Emperor is really a solar system level destroyer, but if you wanted to push it that far, I guess maybe you could kind of say that. But remember, none of these energies come from the Emperor himself. He draws from them on the warp. Without the warp, the Emperor doesn't even really exist to begin with. At that point, he becomes somebody who never fused to begin with, and he becomes an empty shell of a bunch of nobodies, just a bunch of basic humans. Remember guys, the Emperor of mankind couldn't even take over a single galaxy, but somehow is supposed to be beyond the entire universe, and not only that, but multiverses? Get out of here. Why, hello there.
Okay, that was very funny. Really funny. Get out of here, you know. Yeah. And Dr. Doom, God Emperor Doom, he can actually do all of those things. He is universal, multiversal, outversal, everything. So, yeah, that is so much more than what the Emperor can do. Okay, let's see what your guys are saying then. But from these points came a lot of other points, and here we are. Optic, you are not prepared for this. And thanks for the feedback, dear Clayton. So, he creates the primarch, custodes, and the space marines dark, yes, with his own intelligence and well, means of doing so. He is not like Doom to be able to manifest things out of thin air. You know, Doom can do that. He can manifest whatever he is, whatever he likes, creatures, whatever it is, out of thin air, make it so. He doesn't need technology to do it. He doesn't need anything. He just needs his power. That is a true God, what a true God can do. He can just think it and it's going to be there already. Physical or whatever he wants it to be, it's going to be there. While the Emperor needs the resources to do it, he needs the manpower, he needs the technology, and he can come up with his own technology and, you know, speak to the machine spirits and all of that. But he still has to do it as a human, almost as a human would do it. And he still needs the mechanicum. He still needs the space marines that he was able to make through Belisarius Cole. He needs Belisarius Cole. He cannot just replace him with himself. He needs the primarchs. That's what he created him. So he creates, but not as a god. He creates as a man, as any man would do who has resources to do it. So that's a huge, huge difference, like a universes of difference, literally, compared to an actual god. That is a huge thing. We cannot just skip over the fact that the Emperor does not do godly things when it comes to creation, making. The main thing that is making a god is creation. It is not destruction. The destruction is, you know, necessary when the creation, let's say, fails, but that is another topic on its own in general. The only thing that he was doing is to conquer, and well, that is it, conquer. He can destroy a lot, but he cannot. He's still dependent on everyone. He cannot be independent, where a real god can, like a real god, not the ones that are dependent on something in general. Well, we should, like he said, Gamza said, we can stop even on the first thing, the fact that he cannot create, and he needs other people to create the primarch, space marines, or whatever weapons. Absolutely means that he's not a god. Even by that standard, it immediately means that he's not a god. It just means that he has some godly powers, but he's not a god. He's not a complete god. Anyone else that is a real god can pretty much think that he's not existing and completely destroy him right away. I mean, a real god should only need to say, well, you're not existing anymore, and he will disappear. That is it. There's just nothing the emperor can do, because that is how godly powers really work. I know. Temperatures here are not that bad optic, but yes. Now they're not that bad, but they were. But yeah, they're still coming. I mean, the heat's still coming. Okay, what else? And about Vulcan, once again, what I already said about Guilliman. He is in the warp, so he can move back in time or towards, but only with his powers that are drawn from the warp. He is dependent on anything, like I said, he's not a god. Yeah, and he can move probably in time, but still he can't move in time, because why don't he just come back to where he previously was and do everything all over again, stop the Horus heresy, not get into the throne in the first place. So if he was that powerful, he would do that. He can't do it. And until we see something else that confirms it, confirms in some kind of capacity that he's an actual god, we can't say that he is, because it's not there. It's not in canon. It's not there. It's not there. Immense worldly power and beyond, but still bound to set of rules which deems him not, invulnerable. And he's not even, protected physically, so that is why he was able to be deadly wounded physically, and that is why he cannot return now. There's so many holes in this. So many holes. We have to be, as objective as humanly possible, and not like close our eyes like this and be like, no, he's a god. No, he's a god. No. The truth is what matters. We should not be biased in any kind of a way, because then we're going to just lie to ourselves. I bet that if you see Nergo walking down the street wearing a bikini, you would say, oh my god. Well, that's very funny. But you would say that about a regular human being, or just a woman, any kind of a woman, even if it's not attractive woman, you still say, "Oh my God!" So, what is that proving? Sorry. Well, nothing. Nergo in a bikini should not be legal, but everything is possible with this guy. Yes. No, Nergo, you can't compete. Complete in Miss Universe. Compete. You meant compete, but you wrote complete. Compete in Miss Universe. Tell you what, Hell's Kitchen are looking for competitors. I'm sure that Gordon Ramsay is going to make him leave when Nergo is like 100 meters away from the kitchen, because he's going to stink everything. Should say that the Emperor never said he was a god. That was Logar. Yes, of course, Dark, but then again, we all know that the Emperor made a huge effort to present himself as a god constantly before he was embedded into the Golden Throne. He did that to that priest, Uriah, I think, and many other occasions that led to everyone thinking that he's a god. So he did a great job not to actually make everyone think that he is a god. So it was a huge, ridiculous manipulation on his part. And now he maybe is gaining power from all the worship that he is getting, especially for the 10,000 years that he's been there on the throne. But then again, that still is not making him a god. So he's still bound to the throne and bound to space and time, and he cannot come back yet physically. So he is still not a god. He may be more powerful, but still not a god. So there's that. And the beat beats so loud deep inside the pressure sky just to stay alive, because the heat is on. What? True, but better to say "oh my god" about a pretty woman in bikini than saying "oh my god" towards an ugly bikini girl. Well, my dear friend Pudding, you may have heard of him, with whom I did a lot of videos. He just came back from Malaga, and also Gibraltar, if I'm saying that right in English. And he saw literally a beach with a lot of monokini women, and a lot of them were not what you're going to call very, very attractive. So he said that you cannot unsee this now, and his eyes are burned. Yes. It was funny. It was a funny time. Funny time there. I can't wait for him to tell him more about what happened there. Okay. So, thanks guys for joining me. It's an interesting topic. Just make sure you comment down below, and please think about all of that, because there's a lot more when you really take a look at it. There's just so many like endless amounts actually of proof that he's not a god, but still we are saying that he's a god. So we have to measure things in a like really more objective, informative way, because otherwise all of the gods and all of the movies also are considered gods, and they're really not by definition to begin with. You can watch Gods of Egypt, for instance, which you probably not, but one prime example of how to show gods and how ridiculously vulnerable they are. Just not much different than any human, really. Just more powers, and they're taller, but besides that, they can be hurt and killed, and it's just ridiculous. Okay, guys, so see ya very soon. I love ya, and well, as always, you can support me right there at OnlyFans, where I coach and do all of my sex educational, meaningful content. And until tomorrow, hopefully. Bye-bye.